I'm going to tell you some short stories here, and we're just going to go until we run out of time. Then we'll stop. How's that sound? Fair enough? Okay. Let's see. Whoops. Where are we? Let's go back to... Okay, there we go. They're doing something there. That's good. These guys are way ahead of me. Oh, you see the surprise on that little girl's face, that little girl from the Andes Mountains of Peru? Yeah. She's so happy because I told her I was going to Grand Junction to preach. So that's how that works. So I didn't really tell you, but I work in the Amazon jungle up in Iquitos, Peru, right at the headwaters of the Amazon River. It's the largest city on earth that has no roads leading to it. You can't drive there. You have to go in by commercial flight or 4.5 days on the Amazon River by boat. And so when you get there, you're halfway to somewhere else. There is nothing out there but this massive city. Physically it's very small, but there's 750,000 people in a town that's about 12 miles long and 2.5 miles wide. Okay, so very unique in that regard. It's isolated, and you have to be there to. Whoops, I just did that. You have to, like I say, you have to fly in. So we were curious, wow, what's going to happen? I was down there in February and March. My wife and I already got COVID, so you're okay. I'm not a carrier now. We've been there, done that, and came home. Both of us came back to the States. I was able to get out of there 24 hours before they closed the country. Some of my friends took 3 months to get out of there because even while they were still allowing some flights from Lima to get citizens back to their own countries, they weren't allowing flights in country. So if you were up in Iquitos as a missionary or a humanitarian worker or something, you were out of luck, and a lot of people, it took a long time. And the only reason I'm even talking about COVID this morning, because everywhere I go now, people are saying, oh, so how did that affect Peru? How did that affect Iquitos? Peru was ranked the #1 COVID hit country in the world per capita. So maybe not total cases, but per capita. And our city of Iquitos was number 5 in the country. So we got decimated. I love this, and should have shared it earlier. When we blend our lives with those in need, a fabric is woven from threads that are beyond this world. A pattern rich and vibrant eclipses every combination that we alone possess. So, when we reach out and do what God has for us to do involving those around us, man, beautiful, beautiful things come together. And I just love that quote. So there's hope. It's what we're talking about. COVID-19 devastated Iquitos. We had 4,000 plus deaths right there in our city. It closed the hospital system. I'm getting some ringing up here, guys, in the booth. Maybe it's just me, but yeah, thank you. 4,000 plus deaths. We had, at the time that I read this particular article, and it's been close to 2 months now, we had already had 22 doctors die in our city. And that's devastating, on many levels. It shut down all the hospitals. There was no oxygen to be had. The police and the military did a complete lockdown. I mean, you had to be in your house. You had to be in your house. You couldn't get out. And I'll talk about some of the ramifications of that in just a second. Some of the local businessmen that were in the welding trades and needed oxygen for other things eventually came out and set up out on the streets. There were people dying. There were people dying in the motor cars that, heading to the hospital. They couldn't breathe. And the people were so afraid to go because they didn't want to be exposed more that they wait till the very last minute. And we had a bunch of people just actually died on the way to the motor cars. The morgues filled up. There was nobody providing those services. They were putting garbage bags over them and putting name tags on, and they were stacking up until the morgues were full. And, of course, they don't embalm. There's no refrigeration for that kind of thing, so you can imagine. And finally, they dug a mass grave out of town and started putting bodies in this mass grave. So some of you are sitting here thinking right now, but man, okay, but why? Wait. But why aren't we seeing that here? Well, there's lots of reasons, and I'll tell you briefly, and we're not going to talk about this very long, but I just want you to know that here, the common sense thing says, well, are vulnerable, are elderly, those with compromised immune systems, those with pre-existing conditions that would contribute to, fatalities, coupled with the COVID-19, we need to protect and isolate, and so we've tried to do that, I guess, in this country is what we're doing. And But the problem is when you work in an impoverished population like this, there are tens of thousands of people who are compromised. They've never had medical care. They have respiratory issues. They have poor immune systems. There's no sanitation in a lot. You saw the video, so you know what I'm talking about. There's no sanitation, no hand washing. 3 or 4 generations of people living in a house the size of this platform. So social isolation was impossible. It was crazy. So you take the worst case scenario in this country and then multiply that by tens of thousands, and that's what you had, without the ability to separate them in nice, adult care centers and nursing homes and things like that, with all the sanitation and everything that we do. So our city got decimated. Well, as an organization, we're there, we have a presence, we had resources, and so now what do we do? And I raised some money very quickly here in the States, and people that came alongside were just so generous and wired that money down to the bank. Well, then our executive director couldn't get to the bank because it was a lockdown. And then the banks closed. And so we were about 10 days before we could finally get the money and make some provisions with some large companies. She said, how are we going to get that food out to our compound? And I said, oh, trust me, when you call a big company and tell them you want $10,000 worth of rice and beans and all of these other, the milk and the, everything that we need, trust me, they'll figure out a way to get it there. And they did. And they had police and military escorts to bring that food out to our compound because we're a humanitarian organization. And then we were able to start bagging and supplying food to people, and you'll see some of that just here in a second. But these are people laying on the street in the middle of the night waiting in line for the bank because they limited the hours that the bank would be open. And so the person right here closest to us, that's one of our translators, works for the organization. She's taking a selfie, and she sent that to me and said, hey, guess where I am, So she's laying on the street all night so she can get a place in the bank because they only let so many people in during the day, and that's it. So you could wait. They drew circles in the streets for people to line up, and there's 4 columns of those for about 4 blocks in front of the one bank. Well, people got tired of standing out there in the Amazon sun, 9 degrees off the equator, too hot, so they just put their shoes in a circle and then go sit together on the curb, which was kind of, the point of, here's another city block in front of another bank. People are out there the whole night, sleeping on the street. And, it's not cold, it's the Amazon jungle until you get a monsoon rain. And then what does everybody do? They leave the street and go stand underneath the underhang and breathe on each other. So it was really a very, very desperate time. Within a couple days, people started hanging white flags. You see the white flag, started hanging white flags out of their house. Why? Because there are tens of thousands of families who work today to make money today to eat today. Now, if I said to my wife spontaneously some Sabbath, hey, I saw a family of 9 that came into church, looks like they're traveling through, why don't we have them home for Sabbath lunch? And my wife would say, oh, well, I don't have a thing in the house. I mean, she might say that. You've said that. Some of you have said, oh, there's not a thing in the house to eat. If I had to stay in my house right now, if I had to go home and stay in my house right now, I would last a long time with nothing in the house to eat. Now, I might get tired of beans, I might get tired of rice, and I might get tired of some things, but we have food, right? Agree with me here. We have food in the house. My wife's side of the garage looks like Costco, okay? And we have food in the house. So when we say, oh, there's nothing in the house to eat, well, there's nothing convenient or nothing that I want, nothing that I feel like tonight, but there's a ton of food in the house. These people, I know lots and lots of people that get up early in the morning, go down to the docks, carry cargo for an hour or two so they can get paid a little bit, run to the market and grab food so they can feed their kids before they go to school. And if they can't make that happen in the morning, the kids don't eat until the afternoon. So we're talking no food in the house means no food in the house. So within a couple days, when they're under a military lockdown, there's no food in the house. And so we started bagging food with these huge quantities. We brought in truckloads and truckloads of food into our auditorium, and our staff pivoted from everything else that they were supposed to be doing. And some of them couldn't get to work because it was too far away and the police wouldn't let them pass. Others could. Our medical director and some other people, they had credentials and they could say, so they'd let them through. But we started bagging and delivering. We called everybody we ever knew, all the pastors we've ever worked in that city, all the community leaders, all the kids that had ever gone through our crisis center for abandoned and abused girls is what we do there. We've got our orphanage crisis center. And everybody that had ever been there, and we'd say, come with a list of some of the people right in your community that are suffering the most, and give us the details we need on those families, and we're going to send food home with you to feed all these people. And we distributed and are still distributing food to tens of thousands of people because they have no... Now, it's not under military lockdown now. Things are getting back to normal. COVID came through like an absolute wildfire. And, once the forest is burnt, there's not much fuel left. And that's kind of how it is. The herd immunity there, sad to say, but the people that were going to die, died. And the people that survived, and it's kind of almost a done deal up in our city. Now, some of the rest of Peru, where they were able to socially isolate and spread things out and slow things down so much, of course, now it's dribbling on forever, and we won't get into all that. I mean, I know we all have opinions about that, but the point is, it's kind of done up there, but now there are thousands of families whose heads of household have died. And so now Mama has 3 little kids. She's never had to work outside the home because she's raising children, and Daddy's dead. And so Mama's got no way to support these kids. So we've started a microloan program. We're doing business with these ladies, trying to get them up and running, and still delivering food to as many as we can on a daily basis. These are my daughters. I met them. These are my birth pictures for these 2 daughters. I was out feeding street children in 2002. Middle of the night, I was going back to my hotel. I was exhausted. The little one came, tugged on my shirt, and started begging for food. An amazing story. But anyway, I got custody of them right away, bought a house, moved a family in to take care of them until I was there full time. And then I was there full time for 10 years, raising the kids and building the organization. And so now they both live in the States. They're married and have kids and, grandkids. Did I mention grandkids? I'll tell you the truth. I took all the grandkid pictures out of this presentation because once I started talking about grandkids, then that was kind of, Any grandparents here? You know what I'm talking about, right? As soon as you hit the grandkids, nothing else really matters. And just so you kids know, if most of us had known how cool grandkids were, we would have had them first. Okay? We would have skipped right over you. Okay, so girls, if you're watching at home, I'm just kidding. Okay? What a blessed hope we have to share when we go out into the jungle and visit these more primitive tribes. And we did this over and over and over and over for 20 years, doing medical and dental clinics and vacation Bible schools and activities for kids and whatnot. And lo and behold, my good friend Raphael, who just died here about 1.5 years ago, just God love him, was an Adventist man. Because of a result of all of this time that we spent together, he asked us to build a church in his community. There's an Adventist congregation in his village. He was a leader that was a visionary that saw the value of worshiping the God of creation instead of creation. Before we knew each other well, they were still worshiping the snake and the monkeys and the river and all the stuff from their ancient culture. And just an amazing, I could tell you stories all day long about Raphael. There he is with a Spanish Bible. And before he died, he translated large portions of the Spanish Bible into the Boer language so that the next generation could continue. This little girl, the very first picture I ever took of her was kind of her. Her mom was pregnant with her, and it was just a beautiful picture. Maybe not suited for all audiences, but it was a beautiful picture. And so then the next time I went back out there, she was a little tiny baby born. And then every time I'd go back out to the jungle, she was bigger, bigger, bigger. And I promised her that I was going to, when she turned 15, I was going to compile all these pictures. Quinceañera is a big deal in the Latino culture, and that I was going to give her this album, which I haven't done yet, but she knows I'm going to. And so here she is, growing up, this little girl that had the opportunity now to grow up as a Christian girl and not a girl worshiping the snakes and the monkeys and other jungle creatures. Here she is today. She's getting ready for college. She'll start in December. She'll move into our dormitory in the city. And it's amazing what happens when thousands of volunteers like you come to other countries and bring what most of us take for granted in a big way here in this country. We have a hope that goes beyond every difficulty. Amen? And when we share that with people who have never had that eternal hope before, it just impacts lives in ways that can't even be described. So that's Elsa. What an amazing change, what an amazing hope when we can provide clean water 4 villages. The infant mortality rate dropped in half when we put this well in out there. That man, as our agricultural engineer, went out there to teach people how to grow something besides papayas and bananas, and there was an empty government schoolhouse. The teacher was getting paid, he just never came. So our agricultural engineer said, hey, no problem. So he taught school in the morning, and we were out there working on the well, and school wasn't actually in session, so these were just the kids hanging around, but there was about 30 children that he had in that little schoolhouse, that government-built schoolhouse. And so for 2 years, we had an Adventist school 50 miles up the Amazon. Why? Because the government teacher never showed up. Amen? Well, yeah. I hope none of you are government teachers, and if you are, I hope you show up. But now it's also, we hope, we're talking about hope today, we hope that the volunteers still come after they see this picture and after they see that picture. That was an anaconda about 21, 22 feet long, weighed about 300 pounds. Look at the size of his head compared to my hands. That's a big snake, folks. It's bigger around than my waist and heavy. Well, maybe it used to be bigger around than my waist. I'm catching up. Stephanie and Nicole, amazing story, I got to tell you. So remember, I found 2 little girls on the street. Their mom, my daughters, their mom died when they were 6 and 8. They were out on the street until they were 8 and 10, 2 years living alone in a city of 750,000 people. And so that's where Martha came from. Martha, my youngest, and Candy, the oldest, they watched their mother die a long, slow, untreated death. And they have tremendous compassion now for old people and for children. And one Sunday morning, this little girl knocks on the door of our office complex, and I answered. And here she is holding this baby, and I thought, why do these people always come on the weekend when our medical staff's not here? And obviously it's some little girl bringing her little sister for something, got, flu or fever or something. And I'm thinking, it always happens on Sunday when I'm here by myself, So I asked her what she needed, and she said this. She said, I met your daughter, Martha, last night in the plaza. We were all downtown in the plaza. And Martha told me to tell you my story. I said, okay, well, come in. So she came in, and I went and got the vice president, who also lived on the compound. And, of course, he's a lot more fluent in Spanish than I was at the time. And I wanted to make sure I understood well. And so we said, well, please tell us your story. And she said, well, I was living over on the coast with my boyfriend. Her name, this is Stephanie. In this picture, she was 13. So I was living over on the coast with my boyfriend, and I got pregnant. And so my parents said, well, you're a big girl now, so have a nice life. 13. So she said, we moved to Iquitos because my boyfriend's mother lived here, and so everything was fine, and the pregnancy, everything's fine, and baby was born, and it was good. But shortly after, a few months ago, she said, my boyfriend started beating me and beating the baby. And she said, I feared for the life of my baby, and so I ran away. Now, you have to understand, and let me show you the next picture just to illustrate this. She was sitting on, when she sits on a bench or a chair like this, she was so little that her feet didn't even touch. She'd cross her legs and she'd swing her legs sitting in a chair like this. This is a little tiny kid. And all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute, whoa, this is her baby. This isn't her little sister, And so she said, so we're here. She said, so I ran away because I feared for the well-being, I feared for the life of my baby. And she looked at me with these innocent eyes, this little kid. Who's 13 here? Anybody? 13? Close? Somebody, okay. There's a 13-year-old. So she looks at me with these 13-year-old eyes, and she says, it's really hard living on the streets with a baby. I'm an adult man. I don't want to live on the streets without a baby. So she told us this story, and my daughters woke up. It was early Sunday morning, and they came out, and they were so excited. Oh, Stephanie. And so, long story short, she stayed with us for a couple weeks. We had just purchased, Pacific Press Publishing had just purchased our property for our girls' facility. So this was way back in the beginning. There was nothing out there but an old barn of a building. I mean, a shed. It had a metal roof and wooden walls, and it was leaning. And But the grounds were beautiful, and we had hired an Adventist family just to kind of watch things and make sure what was there didn't disappear. And so we made a deal, and she went out there, and she was our first kid to kind of stay there. We just asked this family, would you watch this girl? Because they had 2 daughters and a little boy, and they were thrilled to death. And Stephanie, was our very first kid that was out on that property. And I was like, man, we are nowhere near ready. We had no staff, no program, no money, no anything. We had a property, And we fast forward. I'd like to show you a picture of that old building, but we tore it down eventually. Before we tore down the old building and built this complex out there, we had 14 kids living in that shack. 14 kids. And it was like God was saying, come on, what's taking you so long? There's things that need to be done here. Well, the vice president and I, we went down to see the family court judge to say, what's it going to take for us to have a program? What do we need to do to get licensed, to take care of children? What are we going to? And so we didn't say we already had kids. We just said, what are we going to do? What do we need to do? Oh, my word. She gave us this list that here would take a long time. In a developing country like Peru would take years to accomplish. And we left there feeling really discouraged, and Julio said to me, you're going to have to get rid of these kids. So how can we get rid of these kids? People were bringing us children that had been abandoned, had been abused, kids living on the streets. What are we going to do? Put them outside the gate and close the gate? What are we going to do? We're not getting rid of these kids. He said, you don't understand, Mr. Paul. You're an American man in a foreign country collecting children. And he had a point, right? He had a point. And, the sex trafficking and everything is so rampant in so many of these countries, Peru included, that it's kind of a delicate position to be in. And I said, well, fortunately for me, your name is on all the documents. So, that was my escape right there. But he said, we've really got to do something. And 1 week later, I'm in my living room. The doorbell rings. I answer the door. And here's this lady, judge, looking very official. She's got a police officer and an officer from the court with her and a briefcase. And I thought, Paul's going to jail. They're on to us for collecting these kids out there. And man, my heart was pounding. So I invited them in, and when they came in, there were 2 girls standing behind them, and they came in too. And I remember this one girl was this tall, skinny kid with this teeny tiny little baby. And the other one was a short one with a headband and jeans and kind of like, try me, like a gangster type. I'm like, what is going on here? And they came in and sat down. I went and got the rest of the staff and that, needed to be there, the administrators. And so we asked the judge, how do I, what's the purpose of this visit? And she said, well, I'm going to need you to take these girls to your facility. And I said, oh, no. We don't have a facility. I thought it was a trap. We don't have a facility. We were just asking you last week what we need to do in order to have a facility. Maybe there was some confusion in translation. And she just smiled at me. And she stood up and she dug 2 folders out of her briefcase and handed them to me. Everybody else stood up. And she shook my hand and she said, yeah, well, never mind. And she walked out the door with her little entourage and left that baby and those 2 girls with us. God used that judge to circumvent years and years worth of paperwork and legalities, because those kids didn't need a place to stay tomorrow. They needed a place to stay today. Don't ever underestimate what will happen when you say yes and make yourself available. So here we are. That's not really Santa Claus in the middle. That was just some of our kids out at our girls' facility. Some of you people say, man, I'd love to come volunteer, but what could I do? I have no skills. That's me. I don't have any skills. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a dentist. I don't do anything special. But could you love on a kid like this? Could you play some games? Could you validate the life of a child who has been neglected and abused? This is Giovanna and baby Camila. Oh, man, what a story. I'm going to use, for the adult's sake here, I'm going to use the word abuse. And you can translate that into the most horrific thing that you want, and you will be correct, okay? So we all understand each other here. Giovanna was living in a jungle village a long ways from the city, and it was very primitive. And one day, a neighbor man abused her. A few months later, the same guy came back and did the same thing. And she was about 16 years old, and she said, "Why? Why are you doing this?" And he said, "Well, your dad did the same thing to my sister." So this was a revenge thing. Well, she thought, my parents knew about this both times, and they didn't do anything about it. So likely it's going to continue to happen. She didn't know what else to do. So she ran away. As far as her parents knew, she was dead. They lived in a very remote jungle village. Things happen. There's animals, things happen. And she just disappeared, and that was it. Everybody in that village just assumed that something had happened to her. She drowned in the river or something got her, and she's gone. So she went to a neighboring village, hitched a ride on a riverboat, and got as far away from there as she could, and wandered into another village, and a family took her in. Well, the family that took her in was the local shaman, the witch doctor. And he had a son that was a few years older than her, and so they took her into their home, and it was kind of then a foregone conclusion that the two of them would be together. And so now, all of a sudden, by default, she's married to the son of the witch doctor, the shaman priest of that village. Sorry, I keep monkeying with this thing. And I suppose in the beginning things were okay, but then she got pregnant. And this young man decided that he wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility in his life, and so he did a jungle procedure to terminate that pregnancy, which left her physically scarred. She hemorrhaged. She was still hemorrhaging 4 years later. But in spite of that, a couple years later, she got pregnant and had this baby, even with all these other female problems that were happening. So that was pretty much unexplainable. But then the abuse got worse and worse and worse, and physically and every way you can imagine. Well, we had a jungle worker at our facility that was 50 miles up the river. And he was out clearing brush one day, and he stuck his hand into a brush pile and got bit by a fertile ant snake, one of the most poisonous snakes in all of South America. And they're 50 miles up the Amazon, so they took him to the nearest village, which was the village where Giovanna and baby Camila were. And he was in a long, slow recovery process. He lived, but he was in bad shape for a while. But as he was getting stronger, he was observing, and he saw the physical abuse to Giovanna. And so one day when nobody was around, he talked to her and he said, "Hey, I work for an organization that helps girls that are having difficulty like you, and man, if you could just get to Iquitos, if you could just go there, I promise you they'll take care of you." And she said, "How would I go? I have no money, I have no transportation, I've never been to Iquitos. They don't give me any money. How would I go?" And he said, "I don't know," but he took out a scrap of paper and he wrote the name of our organization and where it was, and he said, "Just keep this, and if you ever have opportunity, then go." Well, that weighed on her mind, and after some more weeks, Italo left and went back to his village after his recovery, and one day she was talking to the neighbor, and the neighbor had a soft spot for her too, and said, I would help you leave if you want to leave. I have a boat. And so they made a plan. And the first opportunity they had, when her whole family was off doing something else, she scooped up her baby, got in the boat, and away they went to Iquitos. And she got to the port. It took her an entire day to get to our facility, which was way on the other side of town. She didn't know anything about the buses or the transportation, and people kept directing her. But she finally got there, told us her story. And again, Friday night, she arrives. Nobody's there but me and the administrator that lived there. And told us the story, and I said, listen, I was just overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed at some of the details that she gave us, and I said, we're going to take you out to our girls' facility, and then Monday, when all the office staff's here, we're going to come back in, and we're going to process you, and we're going to do some medical care for you, and we're going to get things, moving in the right direction. But by Sunday afternoon, I was so compelled with this story, I couldn't stand it. I couldn't wait till Monday, so I went out there on Sunday afternoon to check on her. And I guess I was looking for one of those golden moments, so I'm talking to this girl who's never had indoor plumbing, never had electricity, never had a cushion on her bed, never had 3 meals a day provided, the way we do with our kids out there. And so I thought, when I say, what do you think? That she's going to give me some, wow, a cushion on my bed, something like that. Or, wow, it's so neat to turn on a light, or to not have to go out behind a banana tree to go to the bathroom. I thought she was going to tell me something like that. And I said, well, what do you think? Are they treating you good? What do you think? What do you think? Do you like it here? You want to stay? I was so excited. And she responded to my what do you think question like this. She said, yeah, and she was thinking, and I said, so, what's the biggest difference? And she said, yeah, the spirit here is very, very different than the spirit in my home in the jungle. Can you imagine? Having never had any amenities at all, and then overnight having everything. But what impacted her the most was the difference between the spirit on a Christian campus and living in the home of a witch doctor. I've never forgotten that. We are providing these kids and other, everybody we work with, something so much more important than electricity, flushing toilets, and tennis shoes. We're providing the hope for eternity that most of us have grown up with wholesale, right? I'm watching the clock. There she is. I have to tell you that she finished her education. She moved to Lima. She recontacted her family, who were just absolutely shocked because they thought she had been dead for years. Her mom was in the early stages of dementia, so she wanted to go and reconnect. And by this time, the parents had moved into a city closer to Lima. And so she went, and we stayed in contact, Facebook, and stayed in contact, saw each other from time to time when I was passing through the city. And one day, a couple years ago, she said, she messaged me, and she said, oh, Papa Paul, I hate to ask you this, please, I'm so sorry, but I'm just between jobs right now, and registration for school is this week, and I just don't have enough to get Camila registered, and if you could just help me, I'm so sorry, I can pay it back. And I said, no, that's no problem. But I thought, wait a minute, registration for school is not that expensive, and she's been working, and she's always never hurt for a job. She's, that's kind of odd, so things must be difficult. Yeah, sure, of course I'll help, of course. So I sent her a little bit of money, and she thanked me. And a few weeks later, I got some pictures. She sent me some pictures. And it was Camila, who by this time was in about 5th grade. And she's got her uniform on, and, she's a big girl now. And I looked at that, and I thought, wait a minute. That's not a government school uniform. It's the wrong color. Well, I zoomed the picture in, and I saw this little emblem right up here. Guess what that emblem was? Seventh-day Adventist school. This single mom, struggling like all single moms do over there, found Christian education, Seventh-day Adventist Christian education, to be important enough that she was spending a large percentage of her monthly income to make sure that her daughter was getting a Christian education. Blew me away. I would have never guessed that. I knew that her life had been impacted profoundly. I knew that she had left our facility as a practicing, believing Christian. But where it hits the billfold, oftentimes is the litmus test, right? And just an amazing thing. Well, here about a year and a half ago, they moved back to Iquitos. And she lives right across the street from Poppy's House, which is the name of our organization, Poppys. Poppy's House is the girls' facility, People of Peru Project Youth Services. So she's right there. I get to see them all the time now. It's pretty cool. Ermelinda came to us as a 13-year-old mother from another tragic scenario, 7-day-old Marcos. Unbelievable, people. Here she is years later heading off to a college event. Here's Marcos when he was about 7. Here they are now with an actual husband and the child from between them now with her husband. That's the little one. And there's Marcos in the background. Yeah, what a blessing to be somewhere long enough to see these lives come together and families flourish. Amazing. Kayla, an abandoned child at the age of 10 in the jungle, wandered into the city. A family took her in, compromised her in every way. She had a special needs baby. Now they didn't want her anymore because now she has to take care of her own kid instead of doing their cooking and cleaning and laundry and all that stuff. And believe me, cooking, cleaning, and laundry is a whole lot different when you're doing everything by hand. And so they put her out. So she was one of our first kids in our facility. And there was little Kevin, sweet little guy, but no matter how old he was going to get, he always needed constant care. But thank God for the listeners of a Christian radio station in Washington State who provided for these two in a miraculous way before we even knew we needed the help. Just another amazing miracle story. And here was a few years ago when one of our volunteer groups came down and Kayla was finishing her education and they needed their own place to live as they transitioned out of the program, and the volunteers built them their own house. And here they are the first day looking out their picture window. Oh, yes, there's hope for my pet toucan. See, he flew through the ceiling fan. Hence the duct tape on his bill. Now, super glue works wonders. So I super glued his bill back together, and then we duct taped it until it was good and solid, and hence that well-known saying that I'm sure a lot of you use on a regular basis, when the toucan hits the fan. Sorry. Another little girl that came to us begging for a Christian education. She needed a life-changing surgery. It's so incredible to be able to offer this. That's one of the Adventist uniforms, by the way. That's what that looks like. One of our first girls that came, head shaved, because she'd been locked in the back room of a house for 3 months under the hand of an uncle and a cousin that, again, abused in every way. She finally escaped one day, went to her principal, who wondered where she'd been for 3 months, and then he took her to the police. The police brought her to us, and this little girl lived and grew up with us, and the transformation was amazing. And the hundreds of volunteers that came through the lifetime of her living in our facility, all of the love that you give, all of the validation, all of the self-worth and the esteem that you're able to put back with these little kids, it's just like putting the pieces back together. It's just the most incredible experience. Here's a whole room full of kids that had never heard the story of Jesus before. Can you do a vacation Bible school? Sure you can. It's a lot less complicated here than it is up here, There's Benji, little 7-year-old Benji, living in the slums outside the city with his sister, who's now the director. He runs our dental program. Amazing young man who's now doing free dental work 5 days a week out of our clinic for the very people that he grew up with in the impoverished community. They are so proud of him because he's one of their own. There's a lady that came into our facility with no teeth and left with a smile. That's pretty cool, right? There's hope for the little malnourished babies that come to us because thousands of medical practitioners have come over the years bringing their skills. The surgeons, the general medicine practitioners. We've had some amazing transformation stories that have happened out of our little facility. This is Elias. Came to us one day because his mother heard our medical director walking through the neighborhood announcing, there'll be a gringo medical team here next week. It's not a derogatory term, gringo. It's not in Peru. We reference ourselves that way all the time. The gringos are coming. The gringos are coming. They'll be here next week, medical and dental. The mom heard that. And poor little Elias had this issue with his foot that kept getting worse and worse. They had no money. They took him to the only doctor they could afford. He had no clue what to do. Gave him some cream to put on it and said, it's probably going to be all right. And it got worse and worse, so he could hardly walk. He couldn't play. He was embarrassed to go out in public, couldn't put a shoe on. They had a little special needs sister that required constant care. Of course, there was no father in the picture, and mom was just struggling, as you can imagine. There's Elias's foot. We'd never let anything get that bad in this country, would we? No. It would have killed him. And the medical team came, and it really scared them because they said, this is nothing we can do here. You're going to need some specialized surgical procedures. This thing is very vascular, and we don't have near what we need to do all the cauterizing and stuff that it would take to get that out of there. But that group of volunteers said, we can't do it, but we can make it happen. So they took up a little collection, and we had to send Elias and our medical director for 2 months to Lima, because once they did the initial surgery, then it took 2 different skin grafts to get that thing to heal up. And you can't just go, poor Elias's mom, she'd never been out of Iquitos before. She would have no idea what to do in a city of 11 million people. She would have never been able to find the hospital, never mind, take care of herself there. So we had our medical director there for 2 months taking care of Elias. Here's his foot now. A little scar tissue, but this is years later, What a blessing to be able to be there to impact people's lives, to give vision back to those that can't see. I just wanted to show you real quick. This was our riverboat that we ran for many years. You look closely at the American flag. This is what happens when you get a Peruvian to paint the American flag on a boat. All the people up and down the Amazon think we only have 8 states. I'm not even sure if Colorado's one of them. So Jessica, first day of school with everything she needed for a shot at the future. The face of a little jungle girl who'd never, ever before had brand new clothes for her birthday. Here was our youngest mom. She came at 11 years. She was 11 years old in this picture with her 7-day-old baby. 11 years. That's a tiny baby, folks. That was one of the girls at the facility. That was their little doll stroller for playing. But it fit Junior just right. And Junior, he's a big kid now. Olga and Sarah came to us under horrible circumstances. They hadn't smiled. Olga hadn't smiled for years. Sarah, the little girl, straight face, no emotions whatsoever when she came to us. Horrible circumstance they came from. Long story short, years later, well, there they are, years later, my wife and I. That's Sarah in front of me. Years later, after they'd lived in our facility, she wanted to reach out to her father, who had created and caused all of this damage, and reconcile, because Olga had become a Christian. His health was really, really bad, and we just assumed, and the doctors told him that he didn't have much longer to live. So we brought him to our facility. We had an adjacent property and a little cabin over there. We brought him there to live and to die with some dignity. And I guess we fed him too good and we treated him too well. And he enjoyed the family worships every morning with the girls. And he rallied his strength, helped around there as a maintenance and grounds guy for 2 years. And he called me a few weeks before he died, or he called the staff and asked if they would send me out. He wanted to talk to me, and I thought that was really odd. He'd never done anything like that before. And so when I got there, he said, "Mr. Paul, would it be okay if I got baptized?" I said, "Well, of course, yes, of course." And he said, "I've done some pretty bad things in my life. But before I die, I just want to make sure that everything's right with Jesus." See, folks, the hope that we give goes way beyond tennis shoes and indoor plumbing. Where is that hope? Is it well drilling projects or clinics or crisis centers, scholarships and building projects and vacation Bible schools? I don't think so. You have the hope to share. You, all of us, have the hope to share. When we say yes to the needs of suffering people, when we do that, relationships are built that open the doors for people to meet Jesus. Amen? Let's read the last line together. The only eternal hope of glory. That's what this is all about. God called me to Peru. likely He's going to call you somewhere else. He may call you right here at home. But please, I beg you, I encourage you, whatever the reluctance has been, whether you don't trust your own capabilities, where you don't think you have your own resources, where you don't think it's going to be accepted by the family or your friends, or, boy, I'll tell you what, if I'd have listened to my family, we'd have never gone to Peru. Sometimes it's the people closest to you that will kill your dreams the biggest. Sorry, but that's the way it works. My mom was so concerned about my future and how are you going to educate your kids? How are you going to get your kids through college? How are you going to retire? I don't know, Mom. I don't know. But if God's got a work for me to do in Peru, when He's done with me there, I told my staff, see, we've graduated a lot of nurses. We've got a doctor finishing this year. I've got Dennis. Our executive director is a child psychologist. We have some other psychologists that we've graduated. We got all these professionals. I said, Mom, when I can't do anything productive anymore, I'm going to work my way down to Gardner. And then after that, I'm going to sit on the front porch in the rocking chair and drool. And somebody every now and then will wipe my chin. What else do I need? I got a whole bunch of young people that can take care of me. I don't know. I don't know what the future holds. And I'm going to tell you what, that's a whole other story. God has, and I don't believe in the whole name it and claim it thing, and as soon as you become a Christian, everything you touch turns to gold. And no. It did. Look at the great Bible heroes. That didn't turn out that way for most of them, right? But I will tell you this from my own experience. Everything that I ever thought I was giving up to do this full time, because we sold our homes, we sold our commercial property, we sold our business, we sold everything to go do this. Everything that we thought we were giving up, God has given us back bountifully in one way or another. In one way or another. We have been so blessed, so blessed. Responding to what God wants you to do will never leave you falling short. I promise you that. I promise you that. It opens doors when we help the suffering. Opens doors for people to meet Jesus, the only eternal hope of glory. Should we pray? Father, thank you for this time together. Lord, I don't want this presentation to be about me. It's all about you. And every person here has a passion for something that you're excited to use for your honor and glory. And I just pray that if people are already engaged, that will continue to move forward in an incredible way. But if there's somebody who's been reluctant for a short time, for their whole lifetime, let this be the day that they decide that miracles will start happening because they're saying yes to you. Thank you for the blessing and the opportunity that we have to serve. Thank you for all the many blessings that we have here. Help us to be mindful of the people living in other parts of the world, other parts of the country who are suffering every day. And show us what our responsibility is in regards to that too. Thank you for this church family, Lord Jesus. We just ask that you'd continue to do in this community whatever it is you need to do. And use these people in a mighty way. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.